I'm smoking.
Gotta go.
Wait, let's do it.
No.
I'm not. I'm not.
Welcome back to Minding What Matters. Today we have a very exciting guest who's going to be speaking to us on calm in the chaos.
That's right. We've got a really good friend of mine, so I'm really excited and happy to have him along, Mr. Tim Heetkamp, who's a psychologist. So welcome along, Tim.
Thanks, James. Hey, Matt.
Tim is an old colleague of mine, and he's got experience in a wide range of areas. He's had extensive work working in a psychological field with youth and child and adolescents. He also works privately in there with adults, and he's just got such a depth of knowledge, which is hopefully we can draw upon today. So I'm looking forward to that. But more than that, this is the sort of guy that is just so genuine and so honest, and if you spend any time with him, it's hard not to be kind of drawn into his infectiousness, infectious smile. You should never use infection in this context, should you? But he is. He's got an infectious smile and just a great friend. So I'm really happy to have you along, Tim. Welcome.
Thanks, James. Thanks for that intro. That's a bit to live up to. I'll do my best.
You do it well. Tim, for many of us at the moment, we're currently at home. We're in our bubbles. We're physically distancing ourselves, and that may change in terms of those sorts of levels in the near future. But for most of us, we've either got a bit more time on our hands, or we're actually got a lot less. We've got a variable amount of demands, and despite wherever we're at, there's this constant bombardment of information and things that demand our attention, whether it's children, parenting, schooling, social media, news on TV, or even just being our own internal experience, our anxiety and fear or concerns or worry about future and finances. There's a lot going on for us at the moment. From your perspective, what are some of the ways that we can manage this, or how should we approach this moving forward?
I agree with you, James. Just the level of change that's happening at the moment, the level of disruption, whatever that is for each of us, is quite significant. And I personally think that an important way to manage it is through presence, is through attention to the present moment, what we call mindfulness. It's become popular in psychology in the last 15 years or so. It's become very popular, and at a risk of sometimes maybe not being fully grasped. Yeah, but I think it really offers us quite a lot at this time in terms of being able to calm amidst the chaos. And I think the thing that happens for many of us at this time is, amidst the change, there's also uncertainty, and from the uncertainty, fear can be generated, and the nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, can be activated, fight-flight response, and in that state, we don't do our best thinking. It's very clear from research that we don't do our best thinking in this place of fight-flight. We do very well at protecting ourselves and very well at surviving. However, the survival that we need at this time is a little bit different from that type of survival, from the fight-flight survival. And what the practice of presence can help us with, mindfulness, is slowing down for the mind to get into a state where we can actually, it allows us to do some better thinking, activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, changing our relationship with what's happening around us, and therefore actually being able to show up in our lives in a different way to what we would normally with fear and uncertainty around.
Tim, what do you mean changing relationship with things happening around us? How does being present or being mindful change that relationship?
Yeah, well, if we look at the definition of mindfulness, there's a lot of various definitions, but there's quite a lot of agreement amongst those definitions that it's paying attention to the present moment, or to systematically paying attention to the present moment, non-judgmentally. So that, and if we look at that relationship, we can pay attention with a more open, accepting attitude. It changes our relationship with things that are going on in our life, because we are always in the present moment. Like right now, we're here where we are. There's nowhere else really that we can be. And mentally, we often in different places, thinking of the future. Right? But so what I mean with changing the relationship then, Matt, is that it allows us to accept more and pay attention more to where we actually are, rather than wanting to get into a different place or different time or different moment.
But what if what is happening to me right now isn't enjoyable, or I don't want to be here right now? Are you telling me that I have to be here when I could be somewhere else? Like,
it's a good question, and it's part of the problem, I think, is especially now. Like, a lot of us don't want to be in the situation that we are right now. I prefer to be able to have more freedom and go out with my family, go to the beach again, go surfing, but it's not like that right now, and that's part of the problem. And often it's the problem in our lives and this is where things like addiction often comes into, a substance use, where it's a way out. Naturally, we look for ways out, and this is often a survival mechanism, which is really useful, has been useful. It's why we've survived as humans. And sometimes it can get out of hand when our focus becomes about getting out of a situation and getting out of what's happening right now, especially when we are unable to change the situation that we're in right now, which is actually always the case. We can't change the present moment right now. There are things we can change, but not. There's also things that we can't. So I guess it comes down to that old serenity prayer of accepting the things that we can't change and changing the things that we can.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's a moment in which, or there's a way in which we do things intentionally sometimes to get away from the difficult thoughts, sensations, emotions, or even environments that we're in. But sometimes it can also be not at a conscious level, that we don't even notice that we're doing it. Sometimes we might check out. We don't want to have these feelings, so we, flick on the movie, or we go to bed and sleep, or we go and eat to feel pleasure, as a way to kind of disengage from these difficult feelings or emotions that we have. And it sounds like from what you're saying is that, that is understandable, but actually that can be a bit of a trap sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, James. The automaticity of those responses often, we don't always notice how we do those things automatically, to zone out, to take ourselves out of the situation. And there's some of it is helpful or useful, let's say, at certain times. However, I think when it becomes a pattern of doing things to change our emotional state, then we do that on automatic pilot, then we have to ask, are we actually living proactively? Are we living consciously? Are we making choices that are actually leading us to a full, meaningful, fulfilling life? or are we just trying to get away from whatever we're experiencing?
Mm. And what
so
do you think?
being mindful in the present and being aware of what's happening, you're saying that can give us choice. Sometimes we might not be having choices where we're making a default choice without actually choosing. Is it?
Yeah, that's right, mate. We often are actually, I mean, we're always choosing. We're always making choices. Sometimes we don't realize that we're doing that. And because they default choices, they're kind of automatic choices. But mindfulness can allow us some space between what happens to us, the stimulus, they call it in psychology, and our response. So that instead of reacting as automatically, you have the thing that happens and then a reaction to it. Mindfulness kind of, that space that's between there, it kind of lengthens that a little bit, just a little bit, so that, and it's in that space that we're able to make a choice about, is this what I want to do right now, or actually is there something else?
And it sounds like if you've got that space, then from what you say, you're less likely to be reactive and more likely to be responsive. And if we can be responsive, we're more likely to be able to, you talked about your nervous system kind of react on the cues, on the environment, on the stressor. You're more likely to be able to respond based on your values or who you want to be as a person. So, you draw that logical sequence out, you're more likely to make decisions that are better for you and better for your family and resemble the sort of husband, wife, parent, child, carer that you want to be.
Exactly. We're more likely to live in alignment with our values, with what matters to us, when we take that time to actually become aware of and become more accepting of ourselves, of what's happening, of others around us. And that gives us ultimately a little bit more freedom. And some of that seems to come naturally as well, that when we in a more calm, settled state, we naturally, it's easier it becomes easier to actually recognize, oh yeah, that's what really matters. That's, we can take time for what really matters, and it becomes more apparent to us sometimes, quite naturally.
Mindfulness sounds a lot like another M word, meditation, because I know that those two things often go hand in hand. What does meditation have to do with science and mindfulness, and where does religion fit in all this? This sounds like you've obviously got a shaved head there, so you must be happy or something. How does it all come together, Tim?
Good question, man. And actually, it's a question that when I started looking at mindfulness and becoming interested in mindfulness, that I was quite concerned about, and that I felt other people were concerned about, and still are, that I introduce mindfulness to, had their question about, how does this fit in with spirituality, religion, and the answer to that is simple, but it can also be, it can be more complex as well. But basically, there's a link between a lot of meditation and mindfulness. Meditation traditionally is also, if we look at the definition of mindfulness, is about paying attention in a systematic way, often with a attitude of non-judgmentalness or acceptance. There's ancient practices, spiritual practices in Buddhism, but also in a lot of other religions. There were practices that are similar, that resemble in some ways mindfulness. However, the practice of mindfulness, of present moment awareness, doesn't rely on any type of spiritual belief or any type of spiritual practice or it doesn't require that at all.
It seems to me that it has its roots in spirituality, but particularly over the last couple of decades, there's a lot more scientific research, particularly functional MRIs even recently, that keep showing different benefits from that. And I think we're still at the early stages of that, but certainly there's pretty solid evidence in terms of the benefits, in terms of psychological well-being for our own mental health, but also for you don't have to be unwell to be using this. And one other comment I just want to draw back from what you said in terms of the meditation is that, just to clarify, is that often when people think of meditation, they think of someone in the lotus position trying to clear their mind. This isn't that. Being present, focused is well, you can maybe speak to that. What is it if it's not clear in your mind? What actually is it?
Yeah, if it's not clear in one's mind, I mean, it can have the effect of clearing one's mind, but I think that it sets us up for difficulty if we think this is what we're doing through mindfulness, because our minds might not feel very clear in the moment, and then that's the experience that we have, and that's what we can become present to, is that our minds aren't clear. So if we start with the particular objective, it can create a difficulty. However, there's a difference. Mindfulness does not require a particular practice of meditation. However, I do believe that there's various research that shows that a practice of mindfulness on purpose, that a regular practice, is more effective. Like, it has benefits that are additive.
What are some of that we've talked a little bit about? It gives you a little bit more space to make some choices, so that we're more responsive rather than reactive. What are some of the other perhaps ways that being present, being trying to intentionally be in the here and now, and just being aware to what's going on in a non-judgmental way, how that might also be useful?
It can, I mean, it's really useful for slowing the process of rumination down. When, the natural tendency that we have to go over and over certain thoughts in our mind, especially troubling thoughts, there's automatic tendency for us to want to work problems out, which can be helpful, but can also be a hindrance when sometimes there's no way to work a problem out. I think it was Einstein that said that we can't approach a problem from the same mechanism that created that problem. So often our problems are to do with thinking. Our problems often come, like anxiety, comes often from rumination. So to spend more time ruminating isn't always helpful. So mindfulness can help us step back from that and to just be more aware of actually what's happening for us now, rather than entertaining the dialogue or the story that's going on in our minds.
So there's a sense in which it can help, I suppose, give your mind a break, calm your mind. You talked about before, our mind's kind of going into the future with worry, or kind of getting stuck in past with rumination, or going over things. By being able to be present, focus, it's bringing our full attention to the here and now, and allows us to, I suppose, bring some calmness and, the word I'm thinking of is just de-arouse, or trying to down-regulate our emotions, so that we can, sit with what's going on, and give our attention to what matters.
Yeah, exactly.
I think an interesting addition to this, or not addition, but kind of what you got me thinking of, is this mind-body connection. You've already talked about it, Tim, James, talked about this connection between the mind and body. But I became convinced that mindfulness is important, in part because of the research, right? It's got some great research behind it. But also, I'm very interested in bodybuilding. Not that I'm a bodybuilder, but I like to keep fit, go to the gym. And I came across an old article where Arnie was talking about some of the techniques that he used in the gym when he was, Mr. Olympia, all those plethora of times. And he was talking about not necessarily having to use heavier and heavier weights to get bigger. He's on steroids anyway, but not using heavier weights, but to actually slow the process down and to really concentrate and focus his attention on his muscle groups that he was developing. He talked about it being a very safe practice because you have better technique when you really focus in, hone in on things, and you become aware of maybe certain things hurting, to go easier on that area, and then just to really push, like for example, bench press. He was talking about you just really need to squeeze your lats and then push your chest and just focus on that and then hold it. So he was using mindfulness, we would call it now, but he wasn't using those words in his physical training.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. Yeah, I like that analogy. And what it reminds me of is it's about quality over quantity sometimes, or over pushing hard. And mindfulness is all about that, the quality of the present moment. I remember for me, in the start of my practice some years ago, when I was walking my daughter to school and in a hurry and just needed to get her there so that I could carry on with my day. It was in a rush for a meeting or something, and just in that moment, I kind of somehow was reminded about taking a breath and just noticing, and the quality of that moment became really important to me. Like, wow, I'm walking, and that's right. She was stopping and having a look at something on the side. I think it was a flower or something that she was interested in nature, and just wanting to rush her along.
Yeah.
And when I noticed that, I paused for a bit, and quality of that moment is still with me now, and I don't know if it would have been to the same extent without mindfulness. So I think
it's a great example, isn't it? And because the metaphor that is commonly talked about with this is that you're walking through the forest, and you can see the trees and the leaves and all those sorts of things, and if you think you see a snake on the ground, and suddenly your attention's focused in on that threat, and then when your attention's focused in on a threat, we're no longer noticing the things around us. We're just kind of looking out we're vigilant to the things that we think are scary. And you think about that with this current times. If we're concerned about our property, our jobs, our relationships, it's so easy for our mind, our attentional resources to be distributed amongst lots of different things. And it's, your children that are right in front of you, or your friends that you can contact, or the job at hand is compromised because of that. So it's a really nice metaphor there, Tim. A couple of the other points, that we've kind of tipped in on, and I just wonder if we kind of touch on before we think about some practical tips, is one would be around how it can support our ability to regulate our emotions, or at least to tolerate some of those difficult emotions that come on. Can you speak to that at all, Tim?
So there's two things there, James. One is the rising of emotion in the first place. I think if we can notice early enough and practice present moment awareness more often, there's less chance that our emotions become as upregulated as often. In the practice dialectical behavior therapy, which is a type of therapy that has mindfulness is quite a big component. They speak about emotional mind, reasonable mind, and wise mind in the middle. So it can allow us to have less of those episodes of emotional reactivity when we're using it. Then even when it doesn't, when emotions are running very high and we find that we're responding from emotion, it allows us to recognize that and tolerate that a bit more. So if I'm able to recognize, yep, I'm actually feeling fearful at the moment. I'm wanting to escape from this situation. I'm wanting to get away from this situation. It's the moment that I realize that I can open up to that experience a bit more instead of running and reacting from that space of emotion. I can actually just notice it with a slightly more open awareness, compassion for myself, compassion for the situation, and that can slow down the reaction and the emotion as well. It can change the relationship with it and can in effect down-regulate.
And it's a pattern, like you mentioned at the very start, that if these are patterns of behavior, that avoidance or trying to get away from these difficult feelings, by being able to do that, we can learn the skill to be able to do that better in the future, so we become more resilient.
Well, Tim, this has been really interesting. My question for you is, if people want to learn more about mindfulness or meditation, being present, focused, any of this stuff, what's the best way to do it? Is Google any good, or is it full of problems, or what would you say?
Oh, it's very accessible, Matt. Especially these days with technology. There's quite a few apps that are really have got great feedback, great ratings, good research behind them as well. Smiling Minds is one of those. Headspace is another one. There's another one I think that you know of, the Sam Harris website as well, Waking Up, which is comes highly recommended for many people, including yourself. And it's really, it's not a complicated process. It's which is great. It's very simple, not always easy, but very simple. And it can start. It could start right now from just people that are listening to this, that they perhaps have never experienced this before mindfulness. They could just become aware of something that they're looking at in the environment, or shift their attention to look at something and just really notice the shape, the texture, the color of that thing, and notice that, and then shift to looking at something else. So using the sense of sight, you can do that the same with hearing, with the sense of sound, bringing one's attention back to that, because there'll be a tendency for the mind to wander. So that's a very
coming back into your body is so key there, isn't it? Being able to just kind of check in with yourself and your body, check in with your thoughts, how it gets distracted out. When I think about COVID, I think about how many times we check our phones for news alerts, how many times, people or different demands are dragging your attention, and being able to come into your body and your senses is such a strong pathway to be able to practice this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hey, I'm just aware of time, and we've got to wrap up. So, Tim, we just thank you so much for coming to talk to us and to share just a little bit, a bit of the iceberg about this topic, which is a much bigger topic that we can talk about another time, hopefully. But just really appreciate you coming in, spending time, sharing some of your wisdom. And if you anyone else would like any more information, feel free to comment, and we can try to direct you where some good resources are to practice this, because it is a skill you need to develop. It doesn't always work straight away. It's something that we need to practice. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. No, it was a blast, guys. Enjoyed catching up again, and well done. Love what you guys are doing. So keep doing it. Brilliant.
See you later.
Cheers, guys. See you.